to know how to live the way God intended? Then this podcast series is tailor-made for you. David Taverner asks Bible expert Mike Beaumont why Jesus spoke about living God's way using parables. And Mike will sum up what this means for us today in just 3 words.
Our conversation this time, Mike, as we come towards the end of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel, is one of the most well-known parables, I guess, the parable of the wise and foolish builders. But I've got a feeling that there's another ouch at the end, as there sometimes is with these parables from Jesus.
Oh yeah, there's a few ouches in all of these, aren't there? Because in our previous episode, as we were looking at Jesus coming in to land his message that we now call the Sermon on the Mount, and ending with the challenge that you really have to choose between, are you going to go through the narrow gate or the wide gate? Are you going to take the narrow road or the broad road that leads to destruction? Beware of false prophets who could so easily want to distract you with the pull of culture onto that wide road. But now, having challenged his disciples to be careful of false prophets, he now ends up by saying, be careful, because there is such a thing as true and false disciples, and not everyone who calls me, yes, Jesus, yes, Lord, is a true disciple. So the punch is going to be, as he brings this message into land, so how can I really know whether I'm a true follower of Jesus or not? And that surely is a punch for all of us to consider.
Okay, well, let's hear the words. So this is Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7 and verse 21, where Jesus says this, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles?' Then I will tell them plainly, 'I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.' Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." So he's got 2 pictures, actually, the true and false disciples and the wise and foolish builders.
Yeah, that's right. And the second one sort of unpacks the first one. And I mean, it does start as a challenge, doesn't it? Not everyone who says to me, "Lord, Lord," will enter the kingdom of heaven. And that could sort of bring uncertainty. Well, how can I ever know? Supposing I've gone through all my life acknowledging Jesus as Lord, and then I get to heaven and discover I'm not one of the chosen one. That could be a very fearful thing. But Jesus is going to unpack exactly what he means by that. Not everyone who says, "Lord, Lord," but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. So Jesus is saying here, it's not mere words get us into heaven. Actually, he'll go on to say, not even mere actions. Many will say to me, "Lord, didn't we prophesy? Didn't we do these great things?" So it's not about our words. It's not about our actions. Jesus says what it's about is, did you do the will of my Father? That's really all I wanted you to do. Did you do the will of my Father? And what is the will of the Father? Well, Jesus tells us one thing. He says, "This is the will of my Father, that you believe in the one that he sent." So the most fundamental thing is not about, did you do great miracles? Did you bring great prophecies? Did you lead a big church? Did you lead 5,000 to Jesus? It's one. Did you believe in me? Was your trust in me? And did you seek with all your heart to follow me, to believe I died on the cross for you and your sins, and to follow me in that? And did you then seek to live that life out with me? Did you seek to do the will of my Father as I shared it with you? And then his parable will go on to unpack. So how do I know whether I've done that or not, Lord?
Certainly, his statement just before the parable, when he says, I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers.
Oh, yeah. It's strong, isn't it? Mm. It's really strong. But again, we've said before that, Jesus is very clear that there is such a place as separation from God after this life. There is such a place as hell. He uses different pictures, outer darkness, fire, but it's all about being cut off from God forever. And I never knew you. Now, that's interesting. What's that? That's a relational word. This is not like you did not get enough ticks in the boxes of doing the right thing. I never knew you. We weren't in relationship together. That is the way we get into heaven. Through relationship with Jesus, through putting our trust in him. Because it's all about him. It's not about how good Mike Beaumont has been or David Taverner has been. It's about how good Jesus has been. It's about him dying on the cross for us. It's utterly about him from start to finish. And my embracing him and saying, yes, I believe it. I want it. I am in relationship with you. And we can have done all the miracles and prophecies and great works we like. But if that fundamental relationship with Jesus isn't there, then all there is for Jesus to say is, away from me. How can you want to spend eternity with someone that you never wanted to know in this life?
Anybody can say, Lord, Lord, and not mean it.
Oh, absolutely. Dead easy, isn't it? People sing those words often when they sing hymns and perhaps turn up at church occasionally or sing it at a football match even. So it's not about the words themselves. It's about the intentionality. It's about the heart. Again, it's about the relationship. Did he ever know us? Did we ever know him?
Because the word Lord actually has great significance.
Oh, yeah. For us today, what's a Lord? Well, if we live in the Britain, it's probably an old person who props up a leather couch in the House of Lords and, turns up to vote occasionally. Slight parody there, I know. But it's not really a sort of working word, as it were, is it these days? But in those days, a lord was the absolute owner of a slave. The lord, the master, and the servant or slave. So to call someone lord, you were saying, you have absolute rights over my life. I'm but nothing. I'm a servant. I'm a slave. Let's use that word because it's so stark. I'm your slave. You're my master. Could sound fearsome if we didn't know he was a jolly good master. And the thing about a slave and a master is whatever the master said, the servant did. So when you say, Lord Jesus, what you're saying is, Jesus, whatever you say, I'll do. Wherever you lead, I'll go. Because I've yielded the whole of my life to you. I've built the whole of my life on you. And whatever you say goes for me.
So the parable that follows, as you said, sort of unpacks that thought with quite a hilarious picture.
Yes, and it would have been hilarious. And remember, we've said before, some of Jesus's parables are designed to be funny, and it's all about the importance of foundations, which any builder should know about. I always remember years ago when I was visiting India to teach in a seminary there in Mumbai. While I was there, a building collapsed, a block of flats just collapsed straight down one night. And there was great hullabaloo. And I mean, it was terribly dangerous. I think people died in it. And when the investigation came to look at what had gone on, they discovered that the builder had put up the block of flats with no foundations whatsoever. Why? He'd wanted to save money. And nobody would know anyway, would they? So he just built this house on the ground. No foundations. It looked fantastic, but it collapsed. Foundations are incredibly important. And people knew that in Jesus's time as well. They knew that they had to dig down deep.
And wasn't Jesus something of a builder himself?
Oh, he was. We often think of Jesus the carpenter, but the word that's used to describe him, particularly in Luke's gospel, is described as a tekton, means more than a carpenter. For us today, a carpenter is someone who just works with fine woodwork and perhaps makes, beautiful cabinets or door frames or whatever. But a tekton was, what we call today, in Britain, we'd say a builder. Or in America, we'd say he works in construction. And it's that person who does, a bit of brickwork, a bit of woodwork, a bit of pipe work, a bit of all sorts, small builder. So Jesus was in the construction industry. He was a builder. So he would probably have, as well as made chairs and ladders, probably dug many a foundation in his life. So he's talking here from experience. And people would know the importance of foundations. The thing is, in the Holy Land, it's so hot there that in the summer, the ground becomes really hard-baked. And it would be easy to look at that hard-baked ground and think, tap it a bit and think, no, this is solid. I can just build on this. But the minute the rains come, of course, all that hard bake is going to start softening. The floods are going to come down the wadis. And to build on ground that you'd not dug down into and put foundations in, anybody would know was stupid. So as he's telling this story, there would definitely be smiles on people's faces as he contrasts these two builders, one who took time to build a foundation and one who didn't.
Let's look at each of these builders in turn then.
Well, okay, the first one is the wise man, the one who digs down through that hard, sun-dried top surface and gets down to the rock base below. Now, that takes some effort, but it's worth it. And it's certainly worth it here because when the rains come, Jesus says, the streams rose, the winds blew against the house. It didn't fall. Why? Because it's got a good foundation. Now, you and I have walked in this part of Israel where are those deep wadis, those deep ditches that would normally carry a river, but that dry up completely in summer. But once the rains come, they warn you, don't they, out there? Do not walk in the wadis when there's the threat of rain, because the rains suddenly come from the Judean hills, rushing down those wadis with terrifying speed and force, and people have been killed. I mean, even in recent years, through stupidity of walking in these wadis, thinking it will be okay, and suddenly the water is upon them with sheer force and energy. And that's the picture Jesus has got in mind. Everyone would have understood it. They would have all seen it. Imagine building a house right next to a wadi that's dry and you've not put foundations in. Well, you know what's going to happen. The rains are going to come. It's going to come rushing down, spill over the edge. The house is going to get undermined and it will totally collapse unless you've built on the bedrock. Now, the person who hears these words and doesn't put them into practice, he's the foolish man who built his house on the sand. Don't think sand like our seashore in Britain. He's thinking here of that hard-baked clay that the sun has made hard that looks solid.
Right.
But the guy's not taking time to dig down through it to the bedrock. So when that water comes rushing down the wadi, beats against it, this one does fall, whereas the other one stood. So what's the foundation? Well, Jesus tells us, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house. Or everyone who doesn't hear these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice is like the foolish man. So what's the foundation? The foundation is hearing and responding to the words of Jesus. Interestingly, at this time, the rabbis had this sort of debate going on between themselves. They loved theoretical debates. And they had this debate, which is more important, hearing the law or doing the law? And they bounced this backwards and forwards between them. And they ended up saying, well, the most important is hearing the law, because if you don't hear it first, you can't do it. So Jesus is picking up a little bit of sort of rabbinical interplay that's going on there. And he says, no, it's not hearing that's more important. It's hearing and doing.
Both.
Hearing and doing, both. You have to hear and you have to do. Now, here's the second thing. Not only do you have to hear and do, because for the rabbis, that was hearing and doing the law. Jesus now says, hearing and doing these words of mine. Oh, my goodness. This is shocking. What Jesus has suddenly done here for the listeners of the time is to take his teaching and to put it on the same level as the law of Moses. Those first 5 books of the Bible, the scriptures, the Old Testament. He's had the audacity to elevate his own teaching to the same level as the Old Testament. Why could he do that? Well, because he was no one less, of course, than God incarnate, God come into this world. So here's the test, Jesus says, as he lands this Sermon on the Mount. How are you building your life? Because the only sure foundation for life is to build your life on hearing what I say and putting it into practice. And if you don't, I can assure you, he's saying, that storms of life will come and what you've built will not stand. Because the only thing of eternal, lasting value are the words and teaching of Jesus, who reveals the heart of the Father to us.
So he's not in any way promising that we won't have the storms of life.
Absolutely not. If anything, he's promising we will have the storms of life, isn't he? Storms happen. Wadis get flooded. This is a common thing. And metaphorically, storms come rushing into our life at times. And the reality is sometimes they trickle in slowly, like rain coming from heaven and getting heavier. And sometimes they come like one of these flash floods down the dry wadis, and think, where did that come from? Maybe news of a sudden dramatic illness or a bereavement or a job loss. I mean, these things happen. Is it because we're wicked, because we've done evil? No, absolutely not. The New Testament deals with that clearly. Jesus deals with that clearly. It's simply life in a fallen world. When human beings turned away from God and started to go their own way, stuff started to go wrong. We live in a world where stuff goes wrong. God didn't design it like that, but that's what's ended up happening. Some of it the direct result of human bad choices and stupidity. Some the result of human sin over generations, like all the ecological problems we're facing at the moment. And some we just can't explain. It's bad stuff that happens. So do storms come your way because you were particularly bad? No. Simply because you're human and you're part of life in a fallen world. Even if we're Christians, this stuff comes to us as well. But the point is, when this stuff comes, when you get that news of a sudden cancer, when you get that news of the loss of a child, the loss of a parent, when you're unexpectedly made redundant, when your partner suddenly cheats on you, when these storm comes, what have you built your life on? Because if it's on anything other than trusting that Jesus is with you and for you and is bringing God's best to you, even in that situation, then you're going to crumble. The house is going to crumble, to use this picture. So make sure, he's saying, that this teaching I've been giving you in the Sermon on the Mount and all that will follow isn't just teaching. It's not just words and you think, yeah, it's really nice. Jesus has some good stuff to say, doesn't he? Has some interesting takes on life at times. No. Make them your own. Get them as a foundation in your life so that when the storm comes, which it surely will for every single one of us, you've got a foundation that you can go back to. You can go back and say, God, I don't like this. I hate this. I'm not in a happy place at the moment because of it, but I am trusting you that you are with me and for me, and you will bring me through this as I continue to keep my roots in you and my foundations in you.
And to coin a phrase, that's why what he's saying is so foundational, because this is like the sort of end of his big sermon. This is the punchline.
Yeah, absolutely. This sums it all up. It can't just be about words. It's what are you going to do with these words of mine? We've called this whole series Living God's Way. That's what Jesus is wanting to show us, that when we follow his principles and start to live life God's way, things take on a different perspective. Does that mean life is all a bed of roses? No, absolutely not. Things go wrong for us. Things go wrong for him. People will turn against him. They'll nail him to a cross eventually. People turned against his early followers. People still turn against them today. And not only that, stuff happens in life. But when stuff happens, what's your life built on? Because if it's built on Jesus, on his truth and his teaching, and to the very best of your ability, you seeking to respond to that and to live by that, I tell you what, you can't stop the storm coming, but you can stop the house collapsing.
But can people, get through life having built their foundations on family, a good job, all those things?
Yeah, and you know what? Many do. And, for everyone who has a rough life, there's someone who probably sails through life, seemingly without much going wrong. But one of the things that Jesus will repeatedly teach, he's taught it already in the Sermon on the Mount, and my goodness, it will come out even clearer as we get later on in Matthew's Gospel, is there is a day of reckoning. And we in the modern West, don't like to think about that an awful lot. We like to be the masters of our own destiny from beginning to end. But Jesus is very clear that there is such a thing called Judgment Day. And on that day, God will judge every attitude and action and words in our life. But above all, he'll judge, did you put your trust in me? Did you live for me, or did you live for you? And if you lived your life for you, then you can spend eternity for you, which is without me, which is hell. So it might look like people get away with things. And that's one of the questions that's actually looked at in Scripture at times. Why do the righteous prosper? Is sometimes asked. And the answer is, well, they may look like they do for now, but God has a way of catching up with people at the end.
And notice that as Jesus' words come to an end, in the way Matthew's recorded this, he's got a couple of verses, which I've not read yet, which say this: when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law.
Yeah, they were really impacted by this sermon. So what was it about Jesus? What was it that stood out? Well, he says, not as their teachers of the law. So what did that mean? Well, if you went and asked any rabbi in Jesus's day for an answer to something, maybe you got some decision to make, maybe you were trying to understand some scripture or other, the classic rabbinic way of answering would be, yeah, that's a really good question. Well, Rabbi Ben David says this. However, Rabbi Ben Michael says that. And so they would go on weighing one against another. You never got an answer. You got, well, on the other hand, that. Oh, and then there's this. And so what you ended up with was prevarication from people who were wanting truth. And here Jesus comes. And in his there's no hint of that. Oh, maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other. There's clarity. I mean, one might almost say, if we didn't know he was God himself, arrogance in light of what was there. And he cuts through so much of that old rabbinic stuff. One of the things he'll do in chapter 5, for example, is take them back through the law and say, you have heard that it was said, don't do this, but I say to you. Now, what he's doing there, he's not picking up what the Jewish law said. He's picking up each time what the rabbis had made of it. You've heard them say that, but I say to you. Wow, that's a big claim, isn't it? But I say to you. And for someone to stand there and authoritatively say, I say to you, rather than, well, he says this and he says that and he says this and he says that and he says this and he says that. You pay your money, you take your choice. Jesus stands there and says, but I say to you. And here's the thing. It rang true. People could stand up today and say, well, I say to you, politicians say all the time, don't you? But I say, and we think, yeah, we've heard that before. There's no ring of truth to it. But Jesus stood up and said, but I say to you, and it rang true to them. There was something that cut through to their heart. It had an authority that all these religious teachers didn't have. And so they're amazed at what they hear. Here is someone who is bringing us clarity and truth from God at last, and it resonates. Rather than maybe this, maybe that, or all the nitpicking rules that the scribes and Pharisees had added onto the law that just burdened them. There was something about Jesus' teaching that resonated truth. That's why, for me, if anyone's wanting to discover what a Christian is, one of the things I always like to get them to do is, read one of the Gospels. Read one of the stories of Jesus. Read a chapter each day. Think about it. See if it resonates. And what you'll start to do is you'll find it starts to resonate with that vestige of truth within you that God has put there. And that's what they were experiencing on that day, this resonation with truth. It rang bells within them. It's as if they were saying, yes, that's what we want. That's what we're crying out for. But in order to do that, they have to do what Jesus said, make sure they're building on the right foundation. And that right foundation is the foundation of his words, his truth, his teaching. That's where we find life.
That's why it is so controversial when he says, but everyone who hears these words of mine is so different to all the other voices they would have.
Absolutely. Because all you got from the rabbis were his words and his words and these words of mine. Wow. So that contrasts with all the rabbinic prevarication, but of course it also elevates his own teaching to the level of the scriptures of the Old Testament. What God is going to judge us by, what our lives need to be built on, is not just the scriptures of the Old Testament, it's the teaching and truth of Jesus. Now, for a Jew in those days, to hear a rabbi saying, my teaching is of the same rank and importance as all your Old Testament scriptures, because I'm the one who lies behind them, would have been challenging indeed.
The Message paraphrase of the Bible says he was living everything he was saying, the best teaching they had ever heard.
Again, rather loose translation there by the Message, but I think capturing the heart and the essence that this was the best thing they'd ever heard. Why? It stirred something in them. It resonated. It gave life, whereas all the rabbis' teaching gave them was death all the time and burdens and duties and responsibilities. But Jesus said, I've come that you might have life in all its fullness. And this teaching resonated with them and life started stirring. And that's why it's worth still today building on these strong foundations, the foundations, not of us. This is not about, oh, look what I built for you, God. Look at my efforts in life. This is about building on the foundation of Jesus, not listening to the siren voices around us in culture around, but resolving to be Jesus followers who say, I will build strong foundations in my life so that no matter what comes my way, I know I'm going to stand. It may be tough, but I'll stand because I'm building my life on one foundation. And that is the foundation of listening to what Jesus says and doing it. And in doing those two things, we too can find our lives built on strong foundations.
Bible expert Mike Beaumont explaining the parables of Jesus to David Taverner. Bible Parables in 30 Minutes is just one of a series of podcasts from Mike and David that help to make sense of the Bible, some of them recorded on location in the Holy Land and beyond. You can check them all out on the easy-to-use app UCB Player or wherever you listen to your podcasts.